Hello, everybody. This is Luke here from Five, and I'm here with a good friend and great composer, Anthony O'Toole. And I wanted to get him on a call and chat with him a little bit. He's done some really cool stuff for us on our album, which we just released, and with a piece called FYEWZ. So, Anthony, thank you so much for doing the call.
Thanks a lot.
Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? Where in the world do you live?
I live in Long Beach, California right now, which is immediately south of LA, 20, 30-minute drive away. I live down here and I work a lot down here, and I like living down here because it's a pretty chill vibe, and it's close to LA and it's close to Orange County. So I do work in both areas, so it's perfect to be in this particular area of Los Angeles County, and so I can do work, but as a percussionist or as a composer, arranger, orchestrator, it's just convenient to live here, and it's just a nice place to live.
So are you primarily doing percussion, like performing, or are you doing composing? I mean, what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, like sometimes it switches back and forth, but I would say mostly I've been making my living doing composition in some aspect, whether it's been orchestrating or arranging or ghostwriting or doing my own commissions. But I've also tried to always be active as a musician too, because I just love that role. And when you constantly get both sides of the equation, sort of the performer and the composer, you sort of have an appreciation for both sides, and you start to as a musician, you want to play cool parts, and as a composer, you want to write cool parts, and you sort of work with that, and because one thing in terms of orchestration and everything is to make something idiomatic, is to make it a musical and fit on the instruments. And when you're a musician, you sort of see new music, and I go through a lot of playing of new music and stuff like that, and you see what works and what doesn't, and then. So as a composer, I've always, as a person, you always try to learn from other people's mistakes and successes, and then filter it in through your own voice and into your own life. And that's what I do. I love being on the musician's part of the equation, sort of bringing things to life instead of creating things all the time. It sort of creates an isolation between the composer and the musician, where you should be as connected as possible in the process in both roles, as a composer and as a musician, because often now we think of the composer above the musicians, and the conductor is in between them. So there's a hierarchy when I think it's completely communal, and if you sort of create that hierarchy, you're not really open to the most beneficial collaborations. And you always have somebody trying to assert their own will or say that their opinion is more important, whereas a conductor sometimes has to delineate and be the general, and tell people what to do and unify the opinions. But on a micro level, everybody's making their own musical decisions as a musician. And if you can get the musicians to help your composition through their own interpretation and their own skills and everything that they're dealing with at their level, then the music will be much more successful, because the musicians are putting their effort into it and they're enthusiastic about it. And everyone's contributing their own artistry to the creation of your work, so you kind of lose it after you get the performance. I'm sort of rambling on about this, but it's
a really good point. I mean, I think that's important. I mean, I think something, I'm not a composer, and I've composed music before, mostly for the group that we're in, but it's important to be the performer too, and
but even that little bit of experience writing or even arranging music, when you understand how music works, you become a better musician, because you understand how your piece fits into the puzzle. You wouldn't understand as a euphonium player, you can see how it's used in band or how it's used in orchestra more as a solo instrument. In band, sometimes it's just relegated to doubling, tubas at an octave higher, or being the cello.
We know that.
Yeah, so that's your experience as a musician, but you sort of have a better idea of how you fit into the texture and into the grand design, rather than just being a note and rhythm player where you just see the note and it comes up and you play it. anybody who's good at Guitar Hero can do that. But to be a real musician is just to have the skills and the musicianship, which is more than just owning an instrument and knowing what buttons to push at what time. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to segue that, like, you kind of like described our experience as a euphonium player, like as a euphonium player, my experience in the band, which is just like doubling parts, and I know you've had some experience with low brass and tuba and stuff like that. Actually, for those of you who don't know, which I guess no one really does, Anthony and I actually met at Crossman, the Crossman Drum and Bugle Corps.
Years ago, probably now.
Yeah, it was in 2006. So it was 11 years ago at this point, and you were marching tuba, I was marching baritone. But anyway, so knowing our like history and knowing like what our instruments usually get to do, what did you think of, like, what did you think when I asked you to write a piece for Euphonium Quartet? Like, had you ever done anything like that before, or like what was in your mind?
I had written a piece for Michael Waddell, a euphonium player, and he commissioned me as part of like the IEI, which is like the International Euphonium Institute that Adam Frey puts on every year, I think. And he wanted me to write him a piece for Euphonium Quartet, and I had nothing in my catalog for Euphonium Quartet, nothing that he could even work as Euphonium Quartet, because I have lots of tuba euphonium quartets, but sometimes the fourth part, the second tuba part, goes down way too low, and some euphoniums can play that low, but it's just it's not practical, and it's not like feasible to really do it well. And then I'd have to like alter the octaves and whatnot. So I'll just write a new piece, and I wrote it in about 2 or 3 hours, this War Machine piece, and it turned out to be probably one of my more popular pieces. I mean, if I look at just like hits on the recordings and stuff like that, War Machine is always sort of at the top. And the sales, it's Adam Frey published it with the euphonium.com, and it always does pretty well, and it's getting performed, and even trombone quartets played it. The American Trombone Quartet played it, I think, a few months ago at some trombone festival. So it's a popular piece, and you never know what's going to be a winner and what's going to be not. Like sometimes you put a lot of effort into one particular piece, and you think that's going to be the hit, but then it doesn't turn out that way. It's all about where and when and who. And so I wrote this quick piece, and then they played it at the Gala concert, and then I just got people emailing me about it. So it's a euphonium quartet, and you would never really assume it would be something like really cool. But I think a good composer will make something work out of whatever you give them. I've made my career on that, in terms of never really turning down a commission. Like if I can really do it and I have the time to do it, then I'll do it. I mean, it doesn't matter how much people pay me to do it. I'd rather get the experience writing parts, and I really do enjoy sharing music with people, whether I'm writing a piece for like a middle school band or 3 musicians that like playing together, but they don't have a conventional instrumentation. I wrote a piece for flute, clarinet, and tuba 2 years ago, and that piece has turned out to be kind of popular. I've re-functioned it with like bassoon on the bottom part, just in case a woodwind trio wants to play it, but I made it work. And you have to worry about like things like balancing 2 woodwind instruments and a giant sound like the tuba, even on a smaller F tuba or E flat tuba. It's still the balance seesaw. It's sort of the tuba's on the bottom and the flute's up there. So you have to learn how to balance that and how to work around the timbres and you said that I met you when I was playing tuba. That's like not even my secondary instrument. That's like my tertiary or quaternary instrument. I was just doing that because I just wanted to try something different. I was a percussionist in high school, and I thought like I'll just do timpani, and but that doesn't really like to do drum corps. I really wanted to march instead of like sit on the sidelines. No offense to anybody that was in the pit, but I mean, I love playing timpani and everything, but I was like, I'm just gonna try and march, and I'm pretty decent at tuba, so I tried it out, for like a secondary instrument to be, even close to fluent. Right. So I mean, that was just something I did, and I did that in college too. I didn't go in on my primary instrument because I wanted to learn more, and because I've always been interested in the large ensemble, sort of the orchestra and the concert band. I don't have a clear favorite, but I like both of them because they both have strong suits, and they both can do things that the other can't. And so Yeah, I played tuba in college, and I learned from Dr. Collins, who's one of the best musicians I studied with. And just whatever instrument he taught at that school, I would probably have learned that instrument and taken lessons from him on it. Because
Right.
people like Arnold Jacobs and everything taught people that weren't even tuba players. They would have other musicians coming in, because a musician is a musician. Somebody who has good musical instincts can teach any instrument. If you're going past the nitty gritty of technique and what buttons you're pushing down, which at the college level should not be the focus of a lesson. It should be about musicality and honing repertoire and stuff. It's not about, this is the button you push to play this. That's sort of like the rudimentary stuff that your beginning teacher teaches you, which is a whole other kind of teaching, is that's really just
Yeah.
in-depth, nitty-gritty kind of teaching. And this is more, coming to get the same level as the musician, and you go and learn the musicality of the instrument, or how to be a musician, not a tubist or be a percussionist. So I mean, I took trombone too. I played bass trombone in the IUP Wind Ensemble for 2 years, and then I took piano lessons for 7 semesters in college too. So I mean, I try to get as much in as I could and try and vary my experiences. I write for orchestra and band a lot. So
Hmm.
I played viola. I played upright bass. I took one summer and tried to learn violin, which was catastrophic. But I got a good sense of what fits on the hand and how things work. And if you only have what you're taught in the Korsakov and all the treatises and manuals on orchestration, you really don't get an intimate understanding of the instruments. So I took the hard route. I tried to learn as many as I could to know what it sounds like, but like when the instrument produces the tone, but also what it feels like on the player. Like, what you don't really know how hard a piece is as a euphonium player. Guys play a lot of stuff that's in the stratosphere and in the pedal register, and you guys make it sound easy, but I mean that stuff is fatiguing, and you have to work it out like just any bodybuilder or anybody who does anything that's endurance based. But to
Right.
know what those high notes feel like on your face, and how long you can play them, and then knowing what the skill level of the player is, that's a whole nother spectrum of intimate information about the instrument. And they don't teach you how that feels, like how it feels to play the instrument, or what that feels like under your fingers, like, or that you'll make
Yeah.
your fingers bleed on the top string of the violin, playing the finale to the Shostakovich Fifth Symphony. That draws blood, because it's just the high A and the high G sharp over and over again for a whole page. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of the stuff that musicians only care about. The composers don't really ever think about that, but that's part of the success of your music, is that you consider everything that could ever hold it back or stop it from being as effective and clear as possible. And the one thing I use to describe my music is clarity. I want everything to be exactly clear, whether that's the technique or that's the intent. If I want people to clearly know that this piece is a sad piece, to be as general and vague as that, say like, I want this to be a sad piece, I want this to sound mournful, then that's clarity of intent. So everything I do has to go to that primary objective. And then
Right.
clarity in the melodies, and clarity in the orchestration, and then clarity in the balance of all the instruments together. You know, a good piece should kind of play itself. And then if a conductor has to really sit there and balance everything for a long time, then it's kind of like not as good as it could be.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and I like that. And going back to your piece Fuse, which you wrote for us,
I got
I
to get
think.
back. I'm rambling
Well,
on.
it's just that's our most recent experience with your music, and clarity is a word that I definitely use to describe that piece. Um,
Yeah. Do you want to know how I sort of get that from the piece in this
yes, that was
case?
going to be my next question. I want to, yeah, talk us through that.
So if we like take what I just said in the last question and sort of and got to the fact of clarity, is how do you get clarity from four conical brass instruments? The euphonium is basically a small tuba. It's like half the size. It's the same principles of a tuba. It's conical. The nature of the instrument gets bigger as it goes out. So it's just sort of cone instead of cylindrical, like trombones and trumpets. So you
Hmm.
have these big, wide sounds, and then just if you look at an otoscope, which is the thing that reads waves, and if you have like worked in GarageBand or just like an otoscope, just like you look at the waves and you see the nature of the waves are very different in a conical instrument and a cylindrical instrument. These sort of like with trombones and everything, the attack is right there, and then the tone comes after, and it depends on the player. But every player can sort of get it to sound great, but the nature of the instrument can never be like really tricked. So the euphonium and the tuba have these big sonorous sounds. Like even when they're played quietly, like with enough air support, they have a huge tone, and like that's why they're great in band and everything, because they fill out the bottom textures. And in my band scoring, I use euphoniums completely different than most people do. I use them kind of like a cello section, but I use them as their own choir, and that comes from my experience playing the instruments and writing for the instruments. And then that knowledge gets applied into my larger writing. So, in a piece for band, I might have a quartet of tuba and euphonium, like split in an effective way. If you have every player playing the same notes, it gets monotonous to the ear, and it's not really as effective as you could be. But in this piece, this quartet, I say, well, how do you get clarity? And I use homophonic rhythms to begin with. Everybody's playing the same rhythm, which makes it effective, because there's clarity of rhythm, and you're getting a sense of line, because it starts as a unison and it goes up a whole step in a Lydian modality. And so you get that very effective gesture, and the gesture is sort of like the thing you're trying to say. So that is very effective, and then I phase it off one beat later, so it goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then the top two euphoniums come in one, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, so you get a cross rhythm of the two together. And the drier you play that, the more effective it will. And I think the recording comes out really well because you really made it nice and dry, so you get the clarity of the rhythms. But even a live performance, that will be nice and clean as long as everybody has the same idea of the lengths of the notes. It's perfectly effective. And then you really, with the euphoniums, you have it kind of has a large spectrum of range. You can really get into some of the tuba range with the euphonium.
Yeah, it's one of the largest ranges on the brass instrument.
Mm-hmm. So see, I do two different things. Like I do that really homophonic rhythms, like you get the little, lines going there with the ostinato, but then I have like these little lyrical lines poke out of the staccato texture. So that creates clarity because you have clear juxtaposition between super dry da 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 and then do dee do dee do, and that's in triplets against it. So it's in a completely different rhythmical world too. So you have that sort of that counterpoint between smooth and articulate, but you also have the triplets which go against the duple based 16th subdivision. Right. So that creates clarity because if you have a sea of 16ths and 8ths and everything, and you put triplets in there, you're going to distinctly hear that. And that happens in the Rite of Spring and all over the place. Stravinsky it has created this huge texture, and everything's just sort of undulating and whatnot. And then he's like, well, I need to put this last layer in, and I need to put in like, crotales or something, or whatever. And he puts them in triplets against all the 16th notes in the very beginning. And so that creates a distinct line because it's different than the other lines that are going on. So it's sort of like this, the juxtaposition of rhythmical worlds.
And I will say that's one of the things that was really interesting to us playing it for a couple of reasons. One, just because it's interesting, just because it does provide that clarity, that we don't have in a lot of our other pieces, just because of the nature of the writing or the nature just of the music in general. And it opened us up to do some cool staging things, moving people around. But it also provided a really interesting challenge to just play it in time, because when we performed it, we did it memorized, and we were moving a lot, and we were changing our bell positions and things like that. So for us to like stay in the digga while someone is just soaring over the top with these triplets, it presented a really interesting challenge, but I think it was fun for all of us because we had to find new ways to stay together. Like we had to find new ways to like communicate as an ensemble when we're not just standing behind stands and just like moving and that kind of thing. It was cool. It was very cool.
Yeah, and that's a whole other thing. Is just like I was saying, you could be a note and rhythm player and just play things perfectly, but then you might as well just listen to the MIDI. I mean, music is because we have these little human errors in there, like the little bit of beating and like a waves together when two musicians play it together. Like we call it, I think it's called beating, but it's like when two pitches are next to each other, and they're kind of like tearing at each other, and it sounds like it has vibrato because there's a microscopic difference between the pitches, and that's what gives music its sort of vitality. It's sort of that even struggle on one note, because it's all about struggle. It's all about, tension and creating it, even on consonant pitches. If you play a minor third exactly where it's supposed to be in terms of just intonation, it's not going to sound like the chord you want, because it's all about context, contextual intonation. That's why even a piano isn't tuned exactly to exact pitches, because it would sound like some alien instrument. It would give you a headache.
Right.
And each string has multiple strings on it, because it wants you to give you that sort of beating between the two pitches. That's sort of like human error that makes everything, in art artistic. It's sort of like knowing that perfection is impossible.
So what do you think of? So you can be honest. What do you think of our performance, our human error? What was your expectation? So you write the piece, of course you listen to the MIDI, it's in your head, that's where it appears first, and then you hear a live performance of us that I sent to you a long time ago, and then now you hear like the actual studio recording. Like, what's your expectation versus reality? Like, how does that line up for you?
Yeah, I mean, with some pieces, there are some pieces that can only be recorded. Like, I mean, this piece has the ability to be played live and recorded, but I think the recorded sound brings a whole other aspect to it, because you can do certain things to exaggerate the intent, which is always helpful. Like a good recording engineer can make or break the piece. I mean, if you have the right balance of in the hall, that's one thing, but then if you get the right balance of position of miking and everything like that. But with yours, it's just very dry, and you get each attack, but it's not all tongue, but you get the tone, and you sort of like cut down on reverb and everything like that. That sort of like gives it a boomy quality of being in a room. So you get the really dry, like percussive tone of the euphonium, which is something you could never really get in a concert hall. You'd have to be in like a padded closet to get that kind of sound.
Yeah, and that's something I'm glad you said that. Just to share with some of the people who are listening to this, part of doing some of these interviews and talking about some of these pieces is to show how differently we recorded each piece. So this piece, we actually mics were basically in the bell at this point. And so any reverb that we put on was actually just in post-production, was something that we chose, so we would have more control over that, because we knew how dry this needed to be in certain moments.
Yeah, because when you have the microphone farther out, you're getting more and more room sound, which is sort of the bouncing off the walls, and you sort of get especially in a room like a recording studio, it's a smaller space. It's not like a concert hall, so like everything is right there. And the waves are bouncing off the wall, no matter how padded it is. You're getting a room sound. When you put it in the bell, you're sort of getting the direct tone production. You're not getting the aftermath of the bouncing off of waves, even if it's at a fraction of a second. It creates this sort of natural reverb in a actual performance space. But I mean, I love the recording. I think everything is very effectively engineered, and I have no qualms with my piece. I mean.
Now we did take some liberties with the valve noise. Now,
yeah, I don't really care about that. I mean, if you did it because you had a clear reason, and if anybody has a reason why they're going to change my music, I always hear it out. As long as you've rehearsed it, like in band pieces and stuff, and orchestra pieces, somebody goes, "Well, we changed this. Here's our reason why." And like, if you can convince me in a rehearsal, like that was the right decision to make, and you did it because of staging stuff, and you wanted a certain amount of counts in between something, which I'm perfectly fine with. If it's just if you're going to have a whole thing of movement added to it, I'm not going to get in the way of that by saying, well, it's got to be like this, because that's collaboration. Like I was saying about, once you write the piece, it's sort of gone. If Ravel lived longer and didn't die from his like brain injuries and stuff, and went back and changed like La Valse or something like drastically, like that would be hated. That's the George Lucas goes and adds like a few things onto like a Star Wars movie, and nerds are in a rage. But that's sort of the thing, is like, once you get rid of something, it's not yours anymore so much. It's sort of like it has to go out in the real world, and it's property of the people that have ingested it. So that's why I try not to like alter my music too much after the fact, because it's also a testament to where you're at as a composer and a musician. You might go back and listen to like your sophomore recital, and you're disgusted by yourself, but at the time you thought you were sounding pretty good. but you can't go back and like scrub that audio and make it better and like try to polish it. It's just, it is what it is. It's a testament to where you're at the time. And if I go back and change every composition I've ever written based on where I'm at now, it would be a never-ending cycle of just constantly fixing myself. Where I like to look at each piece as sort of a testament to where I was at that point. You know, what tricks I had in my bag as a composer, what skills I had, what I needed to work on. You know, and some people are a hit regardless of what time they were written. I mean, I have the first tuba concerto, which I wrote when I was like 17 and 18, and it was played later, a few years later. But it's I still get people asking me about that piece, and it's just like, I don't know, part of me cringes at some of the stuff I did in there. It's just like my sense of form wasn't as developed as it was now. I didn't know who I was going to be, and I still don't know. I mean, I don't know what composer I'm going to be, and, you know, or what I want to be. You know, it changes. It changes based on what music I ingest and what I study and what my goals are for myself. But I'm trying to think what the original question was for this.
Well, we were just talking about
miking and stuff.
Yeah, the miking. Now, I will say, based on kind of what you've been talking about, you know, of course you don't know who you're going to be, but, you know, what's the next big thing for you? You know, for those who don't know Anthony O'Toole, I mean, he's done major commissions for major ensembles. He's been finalists for amazing jobs and won competitions. I mean, you know, you're the real deal. So, you know, what's next for you? Like, what do you want to do?
I mean, as I'm sitting here in my room where I sleep and I eat and I write, it's just like, I don't live in that world where people ingratiate me constantly and tell me that, like, you know, everything I do is good. You know, not everything I do is good. I'm perfectly aware that there's some stuff I've written that sucks, like, in comparison, in my opinion. Like, some of the stuff is stronger and some of it isn't, and it depends on when I wrote it and who I wrote it for. And it's just, you know, you try to do your best work, but at the time you can only do what you know how to do. And like every day I'm adding on more and more, because that's the one thing I do is continue to write every day, like 6.5 days a week. It's just putting something on paper, getting the ideas out, whether you use it or not. You know, you're working that muscle, you know, you're building it up, and then someday when you do get a good idea, then it just comes right out. And people like to romanticize the process of writing music, and it's just sort of like, oh, this huge like struggle and such. And, you know, some pieces are painful to write, but some of them are so easy for me. And I'm not bragging in any way, but it's just because I work in that technique every day that when I get a good idea, like, everything just vomits out of me. There's no controlling it. It's just sort of, and I stay up till like 7 a.m, and it just comes all out. And, you know, I write a piece like Fanfare to the Hammer in 2 days, and that's only because I passed out at the table I wrote it at.
Yeah, and you did that with FYEWZ too. If you remember,
I had your idea. I mean, I keep notebooks with ideas, and like, I don't know what they're going to turn into, but I have notebooks going back to when I was in high school, just little books. Like, I got one right here, and they're just these little books right here, and they're just filled with little doodles. Like, you can see there's like a few chords, or like one little harmonic idea, or like one little melody. FYEWZ started out as that. It was a little doodle. Like, I thought of that rhythm because I liked how rhythm is like the most important thing to me. And I'm not saying that just because I was a percussionist, and like percussionists only care about their like own little world of percussion and rhythm and stuff like that, and try to find the hippest stuff, you know. But this is just like, well, how do I describe it? So you can mensurate the rhythm in different ways. You can go da 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 da. Like, if you emphasize different notes, and that's where I'm saying before of like, you can play a rhythm perfectly, but if you don't get the rhythm or like what it's supposed to be saying, like in this piece, there's a duplicity in the rhythm, but I emphasize the 3/4. Like, you can sort of strongly feel that.
Right.
But the rhythm is naturally like polyrhythmic, and it's sort of like if you take 3/4 and then do 16 subdivisions every 3. So it's just like do 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 do. So it feels like 2 tempos at once if you think about it that way.
Yeah.
You're never told that, then you'll never know it. But it'll always feel like interesting to you, even if you're not trained and you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. It's just, you know, it's sort of, that's the stuff you try to put in as a composer. And, you know, like all the best composers, like John Williams famously says, like, the most time I put in is finding that simple melody. You know, you go through every permutation, because if that's not right, the rest of the piece isn't going to be right. You know, you have to start with the good material and like really hone it down. And like what I was saying about like just having the technique and everything, once you get that, like that material, then the rest is a breeze. Stravinsky once said that like once you get like 2/3 through a piece, the rest is secretary work. Like you don't really have control over the piece anymore because you just have to follow where it goes. And then based on like forms and stuff, if you're working with a ternary form, like a sonata form, like the A is going to come back. Like you have to use that material again. And the less material you use is the better. Like that's my opinion. Like some people are more maximalist thinking, but you know, I don't consider myself a minimalist or anything. I consider myself a post everythingist because that's still the age we're living in. In composition, you know, we don't live with any sort of implications or sort of mandates in music anymore. Like people who lived 300 years ago had to do direct forms, and we only study like the symphonies of Haydn that are interesting because they break away from the form slightly, or they have like some off-kilter rhythm or something, or a strange modulation. Like if you look at the Beethoven Waldstein sonata, like it goes from C major to like F sharp major, where typically like it goes from tonic to dominant. Like if it was a typical like sonata, it would just be C to G, you know, and then back. Like
Right.
so there's only like little bits, little tiny little tricks you can do, but we always study those sort of like breakaways from traditional forms and stuff. And that's like what people love about Beethoven is that this like if you look at any one thing by itself, there's like it's not that impressive, but it's the whole and it's the form. It's just like and all the conductors and everybody loves to say it's just like Beethoven was just great at what was going to come next, you know. And it's just like that's what music is. It's just one the relationship between one note and the one next or the one before it. It's just like that's music. You can't have one pitch. That's just a sound. You know, that's just like a car horn or like a beep of a school bell. But once you have two, then you're creating like a conversation or you're creating a journey at least. And with one line, you can show a journey, you know, but then that's, you know, one line. And then once you create a polyphonic texture of two lines, you know, you're creating more elaborate music. But music is one note to the next. I hate boiling things down to their most essential points, but that's true. It's just, you know, to make a complicated organism, you need at least more than one cell, you know, to create that sort of life, you know, the more interesting things. So that's what I was saying with the rhythm. Like the rhythm is the most important aspect. Like I could put that on any notes and it would kind of sound cool because it's just that rhythm. And then I can create pieces based on a 1 or 2 bar rhythm. Like I did that piece Up, and like the intent, that was like the clarity of the intent was I'm going to write a piece using these 2 bars. And the 2 bars, they're 3/4 bars, but like they are like 5/8 and 7/8 superimposed over 3/4. And like that's just simpler to beat. If I had to like do constantly changing bars of 5/8 and 7/8, it would be a nightmare for me to write and like things to beam. And then also when I do it in 3/4, which is the most versatile, it's time signature. It has more possibilities for hemiolas and stuff. So I put it in 3/4 because sometimes I want 3/4 feels with that sort of, I would call it like rhythmic dissonance. It's sort of like one emphasis of pitches and one other emphasis. And I do that in a lot of my pieces. I try to create this, I wouldn't call it an uneasy feeling, but something is off because I've delayed something or I've imposed like 3/4 over something else or like a duple against tuple feel. But that, I mean, that's my appeal is rhythm, you know, and I delay notes 1 beat later than people expect them to be. And some people hate it. But some people are hip to it and they think it's pretty cool. Like, so.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely hip to it. We are definitely hip to it. We've enjoyed playing your music, and I've enjoyed listening to your music for a long time, and in various ways. You know, with the band music that you've done, I've played some of those pieces. I mean, even some of the marching band stuff that you used to do. You know, back in the day, we used to work a little bit together and stuff like that. I mean,
you gotta make a living, and I mean, I don't say a no to anything. I mean, I don't do many marching band things anymore. I still work with your brother a bit, but you know, I just cherish that relationship with your brother. I mean, he gave me a shot when I was 17 years old, you know, just to see what I was doing and see something in it. You know, it might not have been much, but there was like a little spark of something there, like the ability was there. And so, I mean, I cherish people like that. I have people that I've known since high school. My high school band director who gave me a shot at like conducting things that I did. And he's like, well, I didn't want to conduct them, but he made me conduct them so I could really like endure every failure of them. So I think this sort of masochistic idea of teaching, just like I want you to be at the conductor's podium so you can hear every problem that comes up, like, and it comes right at you, because the musicians can be brutal, you know. If they're not being paid, they'll be brutal. I mean, if a consummate professional musician will just say, well, this music's fun, or this music's like interesting, or something like that. I never say something's impossible or hard. I just like go back and work on it, and I'll fake it if I have to. But
Yeah.
get the gestures. And that's the thing that like being a composer helps you understand it. Like I try not to like throw my own opinions and will into like somebody else's composition, but if they ask me to help them out, like I help a lot of composers with their orchestration. I have a few buddies of mine in Los Angeles, and I help them with their orchestration if they're not like a really good orchestrator. Or I help them with their percussion writing, because that's a whole this dark spot of composition and orchestration. Like we don't even have a clear idea of notation of percussion. Like notation for percussion is all over the place. Like you go back to the 70s and they've got like their diagrams and like putting like little things, like little like pictures of the instruments next to each other and like different lines, and it's just we can't even agree on like what line is going to be what instrument. So I mean, percussion is this whole dark area of composition that nobody really even learns. I think the harp is like that too, because people know what a harp is, or they don't really know anything really about how it works, like what a harpist goes through when they play something. You have to like really sit there and put your hands on it and feel what it feels like and how far you can reach, and like what are good chords and voicings. And guitars like that too. You can't just have like a 6-fret spread when you want to have like a root position chord at 6-fret spread. If you want to have like chords, you got to break the voicings and stuff like that. And it's just, that's all like the idiomatic stuff you need to know about instruments. And you really don't, you can be told that in a book, but you never really learn anything when you're just told something. You just memorize it till you need to forget it, and then you move on. I mean, I don't keep many books. I mean, I read them and I give them to somebody else because I don't need to go reference everything all the time. But I keep a couple orchestration books because it just has like graphs of like what are the best like triple stops and double stops on string instruments and the best harmonics and stuff like that. But other than that, I don't look at them all, because I mean, a composer should know their craft. It's just, you know, I don't have to pull a book out every single time I need to do a process. You sort of like, you're not even aware of all the processes you do once you get to a decent level of doing it. You sort of like become on autopilot with a lot of things. But I mean, do more questions. I don't want to just keep rambling. I just want to.
Well, I will say, just kind of in wrapping up, you know, how can people find you and, you know, find your music, and, you know, if a euphonium quartet wants to play FYEWZ or War Machine or whatever it is, how can they do that? You know, do you have a Facebook page or a website, or how do they get in touch?
My Facebook, if you just type Anthony O'Toole, and it'll be the one with my picture next to it. And then I have SoundCloud, but I'm switching from that because they almost tanked. I mean, I read a story that they almost like went bankrupt. So it cost me money to do it every year. So I mean, I'm just switching to YouTube now because I feel like it's a much more pliable venue or like platform for sharing things. More people use it. SoundCloud's a little bit like, you know, I wouldn't say it's like MySpace because it's still around, but it's not as pliable as a platform. So I'm just trying to get everything on YouTube because I'm fusing together the recordings I have and then the scores I have, because, you know, I'll give a score to any piece I have. If you want to see something before you buy it, just ask me. I let bands play my piece before they buy it because I want it to work for them. I don't go with a major publisher. I go with the publisher I go with for most things because I value quality performances rather than quantity of performances, and I'd like to know every person that's playing my pieces. And nothing against the big publishing houses, but I mean, for me as a composer, I love these connections between the people that are playing my music, and I see them all on Facebook, and I know what's going on in their lives, and I see their programs grow, and it means a lot to me because I mean, like I said, I live and work and sleep in this room doing my work, and I'm not constantly in contact with people that are like ingratiating me and telling me that I'm good at something. I live in this world where I constantly tell myself I suck because I'd like to grow, but yeah, I mean, I choose the publishers I go with because I'd like to make a connection with everybody that plays my music, like as long as I possibly can, and that's such an important aspect to me. And then, you were saying reaching me it's on Facebook is probably the best, and
Okay.
and my Gmail account, it's on my website. If you just Google my name, there's not many people with my combination of names. It's a
Yeah,
curse and a
I'll
blessing.
put links in there too and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
now Peter O'Toole's dead. Like I'm the reigning O'Toole on Google, so it's pretty easy to find me. Just go type my name in anywhere and you'll find my site. I'm trying to get a better presence because I really had a kind of an embarrassingly bad website. I just sort of never put a lot of effort into it, but now I'm putting like a concerted effort into getting everything up on my Facebook and everything on my YouTube, and making sure that there's a presence there so that I don't have to constantly be sending everything to everybody and being missing and not getting back to people in time, because it does bother me. So
Right.
just type my name in and you'll find my YouTube, which I'm starting to upload every piece with
Yeah.
a
Well,
score and a recording. And then just don't be afraid to contact me person to person. You know, I don't live in this castle on top of on a mountain. You know, I try to be as accessible to people as possible. You know.
cool. Well, thank you for that. I do have one more question. I forgot to ask you, kind of going back. The title FYEWZ, where did that come from? And like, why all caps? Like, is it just because it looked cool? Like, where does your title come from?
I don't know. Maybe I should just die with that secret. But it's not really a secret. I didn't put anything into it. You know, I just thought, what's like a cool word? And I just like fuse. So I just like, I'm not going to spell it like that. Sometimes I save pieces on my computer just with funny names or something. Like, you know, that's my sense of humor. Like, I live in this little world and I just sort of like give myself as many little kicks as I can. But like, I just saved it as fuse one day, like misspelled it on purpose because I just didn't think I was gonna leave it as that. And I just left it at that. You know, it's a piece of music. Like, you don't need to be told about what it's about or anything. Like, not everything has a
Yeah.
programmatic element. But this one's just sort of like exciting and quick. It's sort of like a fuse going off or something, like just waiting for the bomb to go off at the end. Just there's like a lot of like just like, I wouldn't say tension, but just like a lot of like action and sort of impetus to it. So I just thought that felt like waiting for a fuse to go off, like diffusing a bomb, or like MacGyver or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's definitely energetic. Well, I'll wrap it up here. Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time and just like spilling the beans on what's going on in your head. I mean, it's fascinating, and I hope those of you guys who are watching enjoy this, and we'll do a lot more of this stuff. So, Anthony, thank you so much.
A lot of fun.